Welcome to Storybook Michelle. Today's story is Hansel and Gretel. Once on a time, there dwelt near a large wood a woodcutter with his wife and 2 children. The boy was called Hansel and the girl Gretel. The man was quite poor. The children's own mother was dead, and their stepmother did not care for them. Once, when great dearth fell on the land, the woodcutter could no longer buy even daily bread. Now, when he thought over this by night, in his bed with anxiety, he groaned and said to his wife, "What shall we do? How are we to feed our poor children when we no longer have anything to eat even for ourselves?" "I'll tell you what, husband. Early tomorrow morning we will take the children out into the forest to where it is the thickest. There we will light a fire for them and give each of them one more piece of bread, and then we will go to our work and leave them alone. They will not find home again, and we shall be rid of them," answered the woman. "No, wife," said he, "I'll not do that. How can I bear to leave my children alone in the forest, where the wild animals would soon come and tear them to pieces?" "Oh, you fool! Then we must all 4 die of hunger," said the wife. "But I feel very sorry for the poor children, all the same," said the man. And she left him no peace till she made him yield. The 2 children had also not been able to sleep for hunger, and had heard what their stepmother had said to their father. Gretel wept bitter tears and said to Hansel, "Now all is over with us." "Shh, be quiet, Gretel," said Hansel. "Do not distress yourself. I will soon find a way to help us." And when the old folks had fallen asleep, he got up, put on his little coat, and went outside. The moon shone brightly, and the white pebbles which lay in front of the house glittered like real silver pennies. Hansel stooped and stuffed the little pocket of his coat with as many as he could get in. Then he went back and said to Gretel, "Be comforted, dear little sister, and sleep in peace. God will not forsake us." And he lay down again in his bed. When day dawned, but before the sun had risen, the woman came and awoke the 2 children, saying, "Get up, you lazy children. We are going into the forest to fetch wood." She gave each a little piece of bread. Then they all set out together on the way to the forest. Gretel was scared. "Father, I'm scared. Come with us and hold my hand." The father smiled and took Gretel's hand. The family walked into the forest. The stepmother went first, the father and Gretel, and lastly, Hansel, who was working on an idea. As they went on, he had been constantly throwing one of the white pebble stones out of his pocket on the path. When they had gone far into the wood, the father told the children to pick up some wood for a fire, so that they should not be cold. Hansel and Gretel picked up quite a large heap of brushwood, and the wife set fire to them. As the flames burned high, she said, "Now lie down by the fire and rest, while we chop wood. When it is time to go home, I'll call you." Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire, and when noon came, each ate a little piece of bread. They heard the strokes of the wood axe. They believed that their father was near, but it was not the axe, however, but a branch which he had fastened to a withered tree, which the wind was blowing backwards and forwards. And as they had been sitting such a long time, their eyes closed with fatigue, and they fell fast asleep. When at last they awoke, it was already dark night. Gretel began to cry and said, "How can we get out of the forest now?" But Hansel comforted her and said, "Just wait a little, until the moon has risen, and then we will soon find a way." And when the full moon had risen, Hansel took his little sister by the hand and followed the pebbles, which shone like newly coined silver pieces, and showed them the way. "Look, Gretel, the moon is shining on my white pebble stones. We can follow them all the way home," said Hansel. All night long they walked on, and as day broke, they came to their father's house. They knocked at the door, and when the wife opened it and saw them, she cried out, "You naughty children, why did you sleep so long in the wood? We thought you'd never come." But the father was glad, for it had made him feel sore at heart to leave them behind alone in the wood. The times grew worse and worse, and the children heard their mother say to their father, "Everything is eaten again. We have one half loaf left, and that is the end. The children must go. We will take them farther and deeper into the wood, so that they will not find their way out again. It is the only way we can escape death ourselves." The man's heart was heavy, and he thought, "It would be better to share the last mouthful with your children." The woman, however, would listen to nothing that he had to say, but scolded him, and in the end she had her way. The children, however, were still awake and had heard the conversation. As soon as the man and his wife went to sleep, Hansel again got up and wanted to go out and pick up some pebbles, as he had done before. But the mean woman had locked the door, and Hansel could not get out. Nevertheless, he comforted his little sister and said, "Don't cry, Gretel. Go to sleep quietly. The good God will help us." Early in the morning came the woman and took the children out of their beds. Some bread was given to them, but it was still smaller than the time before. On the way, Hansel walked behind again. This time he dropped pieces of hard bread onto the path. But as soon as he dropped the pieces of bread, hungry little birds quickly ate them all up. Hansel didn't see this happening. How were they going to get home this time? Evening came. Again, the poor children were left alone beside the fire. When the moon came up, Hansel saw there was no bread to follow home. They were very upset and scared. "Come on, we must try to walk home," said Hansel. The children walked and walked, but could not find their way home. They walked the whole night, and all the next day too, from morning till evening, but they did not get out of the forest, and were very hungry, for they had nothing to eat but 2 or 3 berries, which grew on the ground. And as they were so weary that their legs would carry them no longer, they lay down beneath a tree and fell asleep. It was now 3 mornings since they had left their father's house. They began to walk again, but they always came deeper into the forest. But just then they saw a beautiful snow-white bird sitting on a bough and sang so delightfully. And when its song was over, it spread its wings and flew away before them, and they followed it until they reached a little house. When they went up close to it, they saw that the house was made of bread and covered with cakes, cookies, chocolates, cream, and lots of other sweet things. The hungry children began to eat. "Wow, I'll eat a bit of the roof, and you, Gretel, can eat some of the window. It'll taste sweet." Hansel reached up above and broke off a little of the roof to try how it tasted, and Gretel leaned against the window and nibbled at the panes. Suddenly, the door opened, and an old woman came creeping out. Hansel and Gretel were terribly frightened. The old woman, however, nodded her head and said, "Oh, you dear children, who has brought you here? Come inside, children, come inside. There's more here. No harm shall happen to you, and you can stay with me." She took them both by the hand and led them into her little house. Then good food was set before them: milk, pancakes with sugar, apples, and nuts. Afterwards, 2 pretty little beds were covered with clean white linen, and Hansel and Gretel lay down in them and thought they were in heaven. The old woman had only pretended to be so kind. She was in reality a wicked witch, who waited and caught for children to eat them. Early in the morning, before the children were awake, she was already up. And when she saw both of them sleeping and looking so pretty, with their plump and rosy cheeks, she muttered to herself, "That will be a dainty mouthful." Then she took up Hansel with her rough hand and shut him up in a small room that had a barred door like a cage. Scream as he might, it would not help him. Then she went to Gretel, shook her till she awoke, and cried, "Get up, lazy thing, fetch some water, and cook something good for your brother. When he is fat, I'll eat him." Gretel began to weep bitterly, but it was all in vain, for she was forced to do what the wicked witch commanded. And now the best food was cooked for poor Hansel, but Gretel got nothing but crab shells. Every morning, the old witch came to the cage and said, "Hansel, stretch out your finger that I may feel if you will soon be fat." But clever Hansel stretched out a little bone to her, and the old woman, who had dim eyes, could not see it, and thought it was Hansel's finger. When 4 weeks had gone by, and Hansel still remained thin, she got tired of waiting and said she would have him for dinner the next day, fat or lean. The children began to cry. Next morning, she made Gretel fill a great pot with water and make a fire. She pushed poor Gretel up to the oven, from which flames of fire were already darting. "Creep in," said the witch, "and see if it is properly heated, so that we can put the bread in." And once Gretel was inside, she intended to shut the oven and let her bake in it, and then she would eat her too. But smart Gretel saw what she had in mind. She said, "I don't know how to do it. How do I get in?" "Silly goose," said the old woman. "The door is big enough. Just look, I can get in myself." And she crept up and thrust her head into the oven. The Gretel gave the old witch a push, and the witch fell into the oven. Then the girl shut the iron door and fastened the bolt. The witch began to howl quite horribly and was miserably burned to death. But Gretel ran to the cage and let her brother out and cried, "Hansel, we are free! The old witch is dead!" As soon as the door was opened, Hansel sprang out from the cage like a bird. How they did rejoice and embrace each other and dance about and kiss each other. And as they had no longer any need to fear her, they went through the house, and in every corner they stood chests full of gold, pearls, and jewels. "These are far better than pebbles," said Hansel, and thrust into his pockets whatever could be got in, and Gretel said, "I'll take some home too," as she filled her apron. "But now we must go," said Hansel, "and get out of the witch's forest." When they had walked for 2 hours, they came to a great stretch of water. "Uh-oh, we cannot cross. I see no footplank and no bridge," said Hansel. "And there is also no ferry," answered Gretel. "But a white dog is swimming there. If I ask her, she will help us over." The good little dog came to them and did so, and when they were once safely across and had walked for a short time, the forest seemed to be more and more familiar to them, and finally they saw their father's house. Then they began to run, rushed into the house, and threw themselves round their father's neck. The poor man had not known one happy hour since he left his children in the forest, and after he had lost them, the woman, however, was dead. Gretel emptied her apron until pearls and precious stones rolled out on the floor, and Hansel drew handful after handful from his pocket. The father smiled and said, "We'll have enough to eat now, but my real treasure is having my 2 children home again." From that day, they lived together in perfect happiness. This is the end. Good night.